Oh dear. How is that? Hopefully you can hear me now. Um, Stream muted. Yay. Okay, great. That sounds like we've got that. So as I'll just repeat myself here. Welcome to the SiegeGG Debrief. For my first episode here, I have Lycan, coach of SSG, and he has very kindly given up some time on his Sunday for us. So we're just gonna, I guess we just dive right into this and start with, how about we just start with, how do you feel Space Station is from where they started to where they are now? And your particular team, so this roster, how they've progressed and like how they've found this season, without obviously sort of revealing too much behind everything, but oh gosh, great. This is this is what happens when you get new audio gear. Nothing's set up right. Hopefully we can now hear Lycan.
Okay. Test.
Chat.
Is it a slow delay?
It shouldn't be too long.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, great.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so I'll go pretty much back from a year. That'd probably be the best way to describe it. So right before I came on the team, it had King Leo on it, and they just like pretty much made their mark into the NA scene. They beat Elevate, which Elevate, if you remember right, they had just been second place at that LAN against Penta was who got first place. So they were able to beat Elevate and get the third, fourth slot that year. But then right after that season, King Leo was taking a step down. And so the team, before I was a part of it, the like kind of mindset was, well, now they don't have Leo, who is their IGL and main fragger. And they had a really good up and coming star in Chala. But a lot of people said like Chala's kills came really randomly and like sporadic because he was kind of like a ranked star mentality player back then. And so they were like, well, this team's just kind of gonna fall apart without Leo. And when I came on, we were able to still that season make third, fourth, which I think was huge for us. Like we just had, Redeemer, Thinking Nade, Chala, Dave, and Trip, and people didn't expect much from us. And we were still able to like show that without Leo, that team, like we can still perform. And I think a lot of it, when I came in, there was a lot of communication issues. A lot of like call outs were made very awkwardly. Kind of like comms were kind of weird, but we like fixed all that up at the beginning of the season and we were still able to perform. And then after that, we made roster changes for Rampy and Shuttle. And then we all of a sudden became a top contender. We were able to compete with any team. Like it wasn't, oh, they might not be able to win this one. It's like any game that we could win any game at any time. So very quickly, since I've come on board, we've pretty much became one of the teams that you like can't sleep on. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, there's definitely, I've found watching SSG as the season's progressed as a team that I wasn't entirely sure of at the beginning of the season, but continually impressed, and this sort of increasing consistency with sort of quality of gameplay and things like that. So I think that's sort of it seems to be paying off. You said that there was a lot of questions about sort of Chala and his ability, or his initially like about his ability to fill the shoes of Leo. How has he changed, improved adapted since that
Um,
point?
no, so that's actually a really cool question, because Chala's really turned into a whole different player. Like, as I've been the coach, he really did, like, if you go back and watch when this team was really good at Skyscraper before I was the coach, you could see rounds where all of a sudden Chala would just come up with like 3 or 4 kills out of nowhere, because he was just making kind of like plays that no one expected. But now Chala's like turned into a very cerebral player. He's very smart. He knows, like, typically where people will be, like what the defense is required to do when you're on attack. And most of the kills that he gets now are like because he knows exactly what's going on, and not like, hey, I'm going to try to do something. Like, it used to be called like, hey, I'm going to go do Chala things. Like, he used to say that a lot because like it was a joke. But like the kills that he gets now are because he like actually makes them happen. They're organically happening because of an idea, and not just because, oh, hey, I just ran into somebody. Like, I don't know why he's there, but I got him. So no, Chala's turned into a really, really, really good player. I'd put him up there pretty much against anyone in North America. And, he's one of those guys that when like things get rough and you're like you don't have the numbers advantage, that you realize you still have a chance in the round because Chala is still alive. So
yeah, there's definitely been some moments this season where it sort of pulled everything back together. So I suppose, how would you describe your style of coaching? This is something that because I've seen but not had the opportunity to ask many coaches, but like how they interact with their teams is often quite an interesting sort of dynamic. So
yeah. So how I kind of like to do it is I like to be essentially like a steroid to what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So if you have this idea, I like to take what your idea is and then make it better. My big thing is always, as a player, I always felt that players didn't perform as well on my team if they weren't comfortable with what the strat was. So a lot of times we'll like kind of all come together with like different things, and they'll say, well, okay, that's a really good idea, but I really want to do this. And then I'll take that and I'll be like, okay, perfect. We can do that as long as, we do X, Y, and Z, and we can kind of like come up with strats from there. So I'm a person that wants to make sure that they do what they want to do, but we do it the right way. So if that's like an easy way to explain it, I don't like necessarily just taking everything has to be done my way. So a really good example was this week. I wanted them to ban Clash, but last minute they really, really wanted to ban. They ended up banning Echo. So it was kind of like, okay, we didn't game plan for that, but like, if that's what you guys want to do, I want to make you the most comfortable. Like, these are the things that we need to do. And it didn't end up working for us. We did end up losing. But I don't want to be the coach that doesn't let them do what they want. Yeah. So
sort of guiding sort of figure rather
than
authoritarian.
Exactly.
Like, you're not trying to sort of dictate how things work. You've obviously played Pro League and Challenger League, and how has that experience shaped your approach now? I sort of want to dive into some of the sort of past here, and then
sure, of course. I played Pro League for a long time in the beginning of the game. I ended up playing in Challenger League. We had like a really big, I don't know if you remember or if you were on the scene when it happened, but we had a big like roster issue with ESL, which crushed us and sent us down to Challenger League. And that's the reason why I was in Challenger League the last 2 seasons before I became a coach. But like I said, like the whole reason why I'm the coach, I coach the way I do coach, is because of my experience with this game in particular. It's a really different game than all the other games that I've ever played, in the fact that, it's a shooter, but at the same time it's a MOBA. So I played League of Legends before I actually came to this game. That was a game I played before. So I kind of take all my past experiences, and that's why I kind of coach the way I do. But I mean, when I first started playing Year 1, Season 1, I was actually an entry frag roamer, and people don't know that. And then, like, as I got older, I became a support anchor. And then, like, that's where I kind of, like, finished before I retired. But I've played every single position there is in a competitive team. So when like someone's having issues, I can tell each person, like, this is what you should do. Like, maybe I can't do it as well anymore. Or, I mean, like, everyone on my team obviously can do it better than I can now. But I know what it takes, and I know, like, what you should do. And so that's how I try to, like, help them, is from my own experience.
You touched on starting as a sort of roamer, fragger, and then going on to that support role. Do you think that's quite a common sort of progression for perhaps someone that is younger, and then as they spend time in the scene, they see more of the bigger picture in terms of, like, not so much as being like the top of the leaderboard, but the kills are not such a focus. They play that more support role, and then they sort of play the objective more. Not that obviously that's something that they're not doing when they're fragging and stuff, but do you think that's a sort of, as you mature as a player, sort of progression, or do you think that's just some people do it that way? Some people start as supports.
So, like, in any game I've ever played, I've actually been, like, the healer. Mm-hmm. So I'm more of, like, the support character. When the game first came out, I was able to frag as well as anybody else. And it also helped. Back then, I was actually living in Hawaii, so I had a really nice ping advantage compared to others. So that did help. And that was kind of, I mean, honestly, like, that's kind of scummy, but it's, it is what it is. And so that's a lot of the reason why I was an entry fragger in the beginning, was because I could play Ashe better than most because I had ping on my side. But no, I think that most people are really able to find, like, what works for them the best. My favorite operators are Thatcher and Doc. So that's why I ended up making my way near the end of my career to that role. I've always also been a player that wants everyone else, like I said, to feel comfortable. So the teams that I made almost kind of governed what role I played, because the first team I played on, we didn't have, like, another person who wanted to entry frag. So that's why I entry fragged. And we didn't really have anyone that wanted to play roamer, so I roamed. And then, like, kind of as I was able to build and make my own teams, and they weren't just kind of, like, handed to me, I actually put people together so that I could play support and anchor.
Right. So what were you've touched on playing League of Legends before. Was that something that you were playing as sort of semi-competitively, or because there are a couple of other people in the scene, obviously, that started with things like League of Legends. I got involved I was playing or trying to play competitive Dota before I got here. So League, is there anything else that has sort of brought you here?
So League of Legends in particular, I played that while I was in the Navy. So my I was on a submarine, and I can just tell you, for example, one year, 365 days, there was one year that I just wasn't home. I was only home. I was out for 200 days. So, like, when you are home, there's no one that wants to play with you when they think that you're going to be gone again. So most of the time when I was playing League of Legends, I was playing with my friends, or I was just, like, solo duo queuing. Near the end, when I was also playing Rainbow Six like closed betas and stuff, and playing League of Legends. I was actually playing like Go fours and trying to do like the lower kind of amateur thing. But because I couldn't put in the time that some of these players were playing, and by that time I was 26, it was like not a thing that was going to happen. I can tell you like my probably most successful competitive years were when I was a lot younger, 15, 16 to like 19. I was playing SOCOM competitively on Game Battles, which is a PlayStation game. I didn't start actually playing computer until I was like 20.
Yeah.
So I really liked playing SOCOM, Call of Duty, and games like that when I was younger, and I played them all on like Game Battles and stuff like that.
So you mentioned you were in the Navy, and it says so on your Twitter profile. I was actually pretty excited to sort of delve into that, starting with sort of how you got into going into the Navy. If you wanted to start there, and then how perhaps this translates into how coaching works for you.
Sure. No, this is a good story for all you young kids out there. So I was in college. High school was easy for me. I played sports, and I went to a very athletic high school. So if you did sports, you didn't have to try, essentially. I mean, I hardly went to class and took tests, and I ended up somewhere around like a 3.71 GPA in high school. So it didn't prepare me at all for college. And when I got to college, I joined a fraternity. And when I joined the fraternity, I didn't go to class. Like I just continued my same way in high school. And it got to a point where the college didn't want me there anymore. And I got a letter saying that I was going to be suspended, and I panicked, and I went to a Navy recruiting office, and I took the ASVAB score and scored a 98 percentile. And they were like, well, with that, we'll give you a signing bonus, and you can be a nuclear engineer and go to school for that. So I was like, okay, like signing bonus, I'll take it. It was a $25,000 signing bonus. So, I mean, I was 22 then. So I was like, I want that money. Like that's easy money. So I did that. So I had to go to boot camp, and then I went to school for 2 years to learn how to become a nuclear engineer. And I did well enough that they gave me an extra school after that. So I became a chemical engineer. And then I got sent out to Hawaii, where I served on the Corpus Christi for 4 years. And as I don't know how well the Navy has helped me to where I am today for that. I'd say the best thing is just discipline, because I was you hear the story. I was very undisciplined when I was young. I just did whatever I wanted. I partied. I, did other things that you're not supposed to do illegally or legally. And, I learned from it. I made really bad mistakes when I was young. And so I'm a lot more mature person for it. And, when people have problems, I can relate to them better than most people can, because I did them myself, and I'm not afraid to tell people that I did them. So I think that really helps me in terms of connecting with players that are significantly younger than me, because I can tell them, look, I did that. Like I was in your shoes, and this is the path that your path you're going on. This is where it led me. I'm a very patriotic person, and I'm glad that I served in the military, but I never wanted to be in the military. I didn't want to do that, but I had to, because I screwed up. And so, I went through it. Now I'm going to college, going to graduate soon, but I'm 30. So, no one wants to graduate college when they're 30. So it is what it is. And I'm taking it in stride. I'm not ashamed of who I've become. Everything has helped me to this point be who I am today. So, but yeah, I think it definitely helps me, as far as discipline, being on time, making sure all the guys are very organized and understand today's dry run, we're going to hit dry run for an hour, and then we're going to scrim. And then, we have to be prepared for our match, and what that really truly means to be prepared for your match. not just, oh yeah, we're better than these guys, we can do these things and be fine, but no matter what team you play, like preparing the right way. So it's definitely helped me with like that kind of organization.
Wow.
Sorry.
So, some dropping some serious life advice right there
Yeah.
for everyone. I wish I was more disciplined.
Yeah.
Um, so Navy for 4 years, right? So that
Well, six years.
6 years.
Yeah, I did 2 years of school and then
Oh,
4 years. Yeah.
So you're a chemical engineer, nuclear engineer. I presume that was related to what you did aboard the submarine?
Yeah, so I was mechanical and chemical
Okay.
is essentially what it was. So I worked in the engine room. I did like maintenance on pumps and turbines and stuff like that. But then also I took like water samples and stuff from the nuclear reactor and stuff and made sure like none of the pipes corrode or anything like that.
Yeah. I find that really interesting as I graduated what a few months back now as a materials engineer. So corrosion was a big part
Yeah, I know all about that. Yeah,
of what I had to study. But it was
yeah, materials is a tough class.
yes, I struggled with that. Hoping to not actually be a materials engineer and see where this takes me. Let's see how far we can go with this. So I know you're adding software engineer to that. What got you to feel that software engineering was something that you wanted to get into?
When I was in high school, sophomore, junior year, I really, really liked coding. I had a really good teacher, and my senior year, he actually left to go start being a teacher at a college. And when that happened, the teacher we got as a replacement, I really didn't like, and it discouraged me to becoming like a software engineer. So when I went into college, I actually went as an accounting major. And a lot of the reasons I struggled in college was because I picked the wrong major. Halfway, after the first couple of years, then you start doing your major classes. I hated my accounting classes. I only picked accounting because I knew I was good at it and I liked math. Like I've always liked math. So I was like, well, I'll just do accounting. And then I started doing it. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then I just, then it kind of helped lead. It was kind of like a catalyst to the fact that I wasn't showing up and, doing other things instead of going to class and stuff like that. So when I knew I was coming back for the GI Bill, I knew I had to pick something that I really did love. And I did mess around a little bit while I was in the Navy with some coding stuff. So I knew 100% that that's something I was going to do.
Wow. Gosh, so many different forms of engineering and the coding. I'm trying to restrain myself from getting into that and getting sort of too far off.
Sure, yeah.
Exciting, because obviously for my sort of final paper, I did machine learning and I had to do coding for that, and so I did a lot of Python, and then I used some Java as well to do this sort of machine learning, and that was probably the only bit of it that really, really sort of got my attention. So I know kind of what that's like. It's that satisfaction because it's constant problem solving, which I imagine you must find that with the team as well.
Yeah, that's, really what made me kind of fall in love with this game is that it's not just like a shooter where, you throw mollies and force people out of positions, or you smoke off the bomb site, then you rush in and plant it kind of thing. The game is really tactical, and you can't just follow a dry, boring old meta. Every season, there's something new, and that's why I say it's kind of MOBA is because every season, if you watch any of Heroes of the Storm, League of Legends, Dota, every season when they do their operator changes and quality of life changes, the game's completely different. Like it's either like a tank meta or a bruiser meta or an AD carry meta. Like, and that this game still has the same kind of feel as, now with having Maverick in the game, it's really kind of come away from the fact that you can trust any of your reinforcements, and you can't really like rely on the fact that you can bandit or impact trick something, because it's not going to work every single time unless you're banning Maverick all the time. So not only is the meta different, but I mean, game to game, as you remove a Mira from the field, the game completely changes. Like without Mira on the field, no map is the same. So like being able to practice different forms of the game in scrims is pretty big in this game compared to any other.
So that almost leads into two questions. I'll start with the first one, which is obviously Season 8 saw Pro League sort of added in like banning and things like this, like quite sort of significant changes in that way. And then the 5 sides. Do you think has the banning it must have increased like workload because you have to prepare for so many different situations, or do you have a more like uniform sort of generalized sort of preparation?
It kind of depends on the kind of person you are. This is also kind of the coach I am that I didn't even really think about talking too much about. Is a lot of people, when they have problems, are like, well, let's go dry run it. Let's like go figure out why that didn't work. And I'm not actually a huge fan of doing that, because of the fact that really you could go into a dry run and come up with 1,000 different solutions. And you could come up with 1,000 different ways why something won't work. Like, well, you could be bucked from below, you could be bucked from above, they could buck you from the side. Like, so to actually tell your team to go get into a lobby and dry run a situation, you could be there for 5 days. So I don't like doing that, because like if you tell, like, what if one person died before like that part of the strat even enacted? Now who's filling in his role, and now you still have to do your role and his role because he died. There's just too many situations where like, so like the way I like to preach is adaptability, understanding how the map works, what your strategy is, what your responsibility is, and if someone else dies, who can actually fill in that responsibility the easiest. So it's not really too much about, and the workload didn't necessarily increase, but the skill cap increased.
Yeah.
To understand that on Oregon, if you're playing a team and they ban Thatcher, why you have to ban Mute. Yeah. Like that understanding like doesn't really come to people organically. So like that's the kind of stuff I like to teach. Yeah. It's not necessarily, okay, Thatcher's not here, so what operator are we going to pick instead? It's, oh no, Thatcher's gone. We know what they want to pick. So that's the kind of stuff that's really important. So not really too much workload. I mean, kind of, because some people don't get it quickly. So then you have to like teach a little bit more. But I think it's more skill cap increase.
Yeah. So one of the other things, because you obviously brought up the changes of Maverick, what are your opinions on Maverick and then Clash and how they've changed the meta at this point?
I think Maverick was a really cool idea. I think the way that he ended up coming into the game was really bad. Sound is a huge issue with him, mostly because of the way that Rainbow Six wanted to create sound. They wanted it to be something where, if they did something down the hallway, you would hear that noise through the door that you're standing next to. And, a lot of games like Counter-Strike, if they're on the other side of the wall and they make noise, you hear it through the wall. And that's not necessarily something that happens. You hear it technically in real life through the door. So I do get that Rainbow Six was trying to create this like real sound scenario, but for gamers, it's really hard because in every other game, we're so used to it coming right through the wall, like right next to us. So it's frustrating at times. And then, you know, when you have an operator that you create like this, if like there's a door that's closed right there, you don't hear the sound. So now Maverick is making holes on the other side of your wall and then quick swapping to his gun and killing you right away. It's just really broken. So I really like the idea of Maverick, but it's really hard to deal with as a defender because you can't just stare at walls the whole round. You can't, I mean, no one, like you only have 5 defenders. You can't have them all turn and look at reinforced walls. Like they're supposed to be there to protect you in the first place. So that kind of understanding has been weird to adjust to. The big thing is like understanding angles and stuff. So I try to teach them like think a lot of like where you're standing, just like you would it as a drone hole. Like you don't want to go sit on the drone hole. Like make sure that you're in a good spot that, you know, if something happens that you can react to it. So it does change a little default positions, I would say. But I do like Maverick overall. I think he's a pretty cool operator. He's a cool idea. I really do like the idea of having more hard breach in the game. Kind of how he like ended up coming out. I didn't expect him to like open up hatches the way he does. I don't like the way that he kind of like struggles with hatches. It's really weird, and I kind of honestly thought that when he was going to be formed, you wouldn't be drawing on the walls the way that you do. So yeah, it's kind of weird how it all came to life, but I think good idea. And then for Clash, I don't like it. I don't like shields. I've never been a huge fan of shields. I've never really ran teams that like shields. If they want to like continue to have a place in this game, like that's not up to me, honestly. And my only thing is I have to prepare my guys to play the game that's out there. So I'm not really too worried about complaining about shields. You know, we just have to learn how to play with and against them. The only thing I don't like with her is you can't reach her, and they're trying to change that with like the patch notes and stuff. Is like she slows you so much, and then like you're slowed afterwards that pretty much as long as she keeps walking backwards, you'll never catch her. Yeah. And then so if you're in a position where you're like a 2v3 and they have a Clash still alive, you lost the round. As long as they play it right. You know, if you get too close, like we saw, I don't know if you're watching, but you saw Laxing. They were in a 1v2 and he got too close with the shield, and Eclipse was ended up able to like punch him and then shoot him. You know, he made a mistake. He even tweeted out that he made like a big mistake doing that. So yeah, as long as you play Clash right, it's really hard to lose. I mean, that's just pretty much how it works. And I mean, I think honestly, I wish they would have never released her, but yeah, it's just one of those things you have to deal with.
So, you mentioned when you said that you've never run teams that run shields or like running shields. My immediate thought was Latin America, because we've got some amazing sort of blitz players, like people like Sexy Cake, Julio, and then I started sort of this whole little train of thought comes along with how do you approach looking at and dealing with other regions? Because obviously, I suppose with North America, it's more accessible in terms of ping to scrim against them, but there's still going to be some ping, whereas it's probably more challenging to scrim across into Europe or Asia. So
sure. I mean, we have a weekly scrim we scrim phase every week. So like we do scrim other regions. EU is kind of hard. You have to do a weekend scrim like during the afternoon. So that's, you know, kind of whatever. But yeah, we do play other regions. And I just meant that I've never played a team who had like a Montaigne player, like, you know, SK, like Mint will play Montaigne, and like they obviously this week they all play Clash, like they like playing shields. And I mean, I don't have a problem with the fact that other teams run it, because there's ways to beat it. And that's the whole thing of adaptability, understanding like what ops that other teams are bringing. I've never struggled against teams that bring shields because they have one less gun on the field. So as long as you play it right, you can win it just as easy as any other round. And as long as you're banning right and you're prepared for them to bring shields, then it's fine. So I mean, other regions do like bringing the blitz a lot more. And honestly, I just don't think that blitz is that good. There is easy ways to deal with blitz, and as long as you kind of game plan and are ready for it, then I really do like that everyone runs their own kind of play style, because then the game doesn't get boring.
Yeah, certainly. It would. One of my favorite aspects is how there is sort of these independent metas for each region, and the way each region plays. It would be really interesting to see how Asia develops as a region, like the whole of APAC. See whether because there are probably like each part of APAC as well probably has their own forms of meta. We've seen some exceptional stuff out of Japanese teams with sort of really bizarre things. That one of the most sort of easy to remember ones was that Hibana shotgun at, I think it was season 7 finals, from Norengo, for example.
Yeah.
Which and their playstyle obviously caught off Rogue quite a bit, which I think maybe they'd slept on Norengo, but also coming from such a sort of underdeveloped region, that's quite an easy thing to do. So it's really interesting to see that sort of adaptability. One of the teams that is sort of praised for their adaptability is G2, or that roster that is G2, formerly Penta. What do you think it is that they are doing right that puts them where they are?
I think the thing that they do right, and I'm not 100%, this is just kind of like how I feel, mostly because I haven't talked to Shast that much about how he runs his team. But I feel like them in particular run less strats than any other team in the world. And what I mean by that is they do have defensive setups, obviously, that they go over, so you're not like talking about it like before the round starts, but they're able to move around their reinforcements depending on where the team is actually attacking. Because usually you'll have your setups based on the homework that you do. Obviously, if a team on border likes to attack office, you're not going to heavily fortify over on the box and armory side. That doesn't make any sense. So I think, but more particularly on attack, they'll see how a team is set up where their players are actually like defaulted into positions, and that determines everything they do for the round. And that's what I try to like help teach my guys, because like I said, I don't like to run dry run attacks, because what if someone gets picked right off the bat? Now that guy had a whole round of stuff that you had assigned for him to do. Now what does he do?
Yeah.
Like, who fills in that role? Like, it makes it too hard when you're like, well, I have to do what I have to do, and now I have to memorize what everyone else is going to do just in case they die. And it's a lot of stress to put on a player that doesn't need to be there. Like, if they're going to do an office attack and there's someone that's sitting in that sandwich spot, like where, like I used to call it Canadian, some people call it sandwich and office or whatever. Like, if there's someone sitting there, grenade them and then take the map control. Like, it's just kind of one of those things where I think G2 adapts. All their strats are based pretty much on how the other team is playing. And that's really difficult to do. All of them have been playing since the beginning of the game, and Shots does a really good job of giving them as much information as possible to what they're probably going to do. And then a lot of it is on Fabian and Pengu's shoulders to carry them through the rest of the game. Because, Shots can only do so much. What if they completely remake every strat? Then, kind of like it's hard as a coach to prepare someone for something they've never done before. All you can do is say, well, most likely like this will happen. So no, they're really good. they've kind of figured out their their niche, and like they have a very good checklist for things to do on maps they play. And like that's the big thing that you always have to do as a team is figure out what checklist works well for you, and they've figured it out and they've mastered it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm learning things as well, just from my own individual play. Um, and so, with you mentioned sort of homework and things, and things like how obviously you've said that you don't like forming specific sort of strats, and I imagine like the sort of fact that you don't focus heavily on dry runs and things like that means that you're not as sort of unbalanced as a team when you get unexpected bans, perhaps things like sort of the unexpected in theory doesn't phase your guys as much.
Yeah, I would agree.
Continue.
Yeah, no, I mean the big thing too is not just always assuming what like you think is going to happen is the thing that always will happen, because a lot of teams you're like, okay, so they're going to do this and then they're going to do this. Well, when they don't do those things, does that mean like your whole game plan is thrown out the window, and now you just kind of have to like audible on everything on the run? So that's why I like to preach like just the adaptability and being able to say, okay, so they did ban Glass, whatever. Like we thought they were going to ban Lion, but they banned Glass. Okay, so like that just means, you know, like we have to be ready for a different kind of game plan. So I don't think it's too difficult to. I think it's more difficult for teams to dry run everything, and teams that like to be very. There are players who just like are required to be very comfortable in their role. Like they have to know exactly what they have to do, kind of like quote unquote be babysat. But to be in Pro League, you have to be able to adapt. And the good teams can do all the things that are required of them without being told what to do. Yeah. And so being able to like, that's like one of the first things I always tell players, like, what do I have to do to like make it to the next level? I always tell them, learn how to drone right and learn how to adapt. Those are the two things you have to do.
Just getting audio recommendations from my own guys. Donut asked a question a little earlier, and I was just going to get that. What Donut asks what feature you'd most like to see on SiegeGG and what you think of the current site. I'm gonna modify that a bit and firstly ask, do you use SiegeGG, and if so, how?
So the way that I use SiegeGG most frequently is obviously the stats. I do read articles sometimes when they come out, mostly because of things that might like surprise me. What I'm trying to think of like an example of something that hit me that I didn't even know about. I know about a lot of things before you guys will know about them, just because like that's how the inner workings happen. And it's kind of like, you know, a hush hush, like, oh, I heard this, oh, I heard this. But I will always read the stories, especially too if they like impact my team. So like when Rampy was going through his issue, you guys posted an article about that, and I read it just to kind of like see what it said. So if I felt like I could like add something to it, I could like retweet it. Give leaks. No. No. But stats are mostly what I use, and it's kind of weird to say that too, because I hate the fact that stats are like that important. I'll tell you, my most looked at stat would be opening deaths. I don't like kills most of the time. I don't care that much about, and like unless someone like had a big game where, you know, they go 12-1 or something, you're like, oh dang, he went off, he had a really great game. But most of the time, I'm mostly worried about who's dying early and how many times did they die early.
So, what now I feel like now that we've sort of established that that you look at CGG, which I don't think is too surprising considering sort of some of the hard work that definitely the stats guys do along with everyone else. But so what would you like to see out of SiegeGG at this point?
So I'll say that I'm probably not 100% sure on everything that you guys are doing or currently working on. I do like the fact that you're essentially like, I hate to use this analogy, but the ESPN for Rainbow Six. I do like the articles, maybe some like sort of like top, not top because I think you guys do that as well, but like weekly reports on, I guess this kind of stuff is more of what I want to see, not necessarily like not my ideas on the world, but more of a broadcast where you guys talk about the games and you guys bring on an analyst to actually. This is one thing that drives me nuts a lot of times about Rainbow Six is sometimes our analyst work isn't that strong. And so it's really hard for players to get better from watching Rainbow Six because a lot of what Kickstarter and Intero do, which they do a great job, a lot of what they do is color commentary. And they do try to throw in some analytical stuff in there, but sometimes I don't agree with it. Sometimes I don't think they dive deep enough into it. And so I would really like to see more of like why things are happening and why that guy is actually there. Like what's his responsibility, why it was so important that this one frag went off the board. Like that kind of stuff is really interesting to me. And I don't know so much to how it's interesting to other people, but that's the thing that I really like about this game and how I think it could make it better is like if people really understood what they're watching when they're watching it.
So that almost sort of begs the question. You've outlined sort of the kind of analysis that you want, but is that what makes a good analyst for you in Siege? Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you'll see like, say just a smoke for like a simple example, a smoke making shotgun holes across the wall. Mm-hmm. And then like sometimes they'll be like, and you see smokes opening up a line of sight, and then that's all that's said. But like, why that line of sight is important, some people might not understand, and then it's just completely passed upon because you just make the assumption that everyone knows what you know, but most players don't. Like a lot of like I don't know what the breakdown is, but it's only like the top 2 or 5% that's plat and above. And some players only make those shotgun holes because they've seen other smokes make those shotgun holes. Mm-hmm. So like why am I making this? Why is it important? Like, am I supposed to rotate around late round and use those as a line of sight back into the bomb site? Or am I supposed to be into the bomb site and looking through those holes outside of it? Like, I don't understand like why they're there. That kind of stuff is what's important to me. Actually teaching people as it goes along why you brought a jackal instead of a Dokkaebi when they kind of can do the same job. Like one round you brought the jackal, it didn't work, and next time you bring Dokkaebi. Like, why did you make that selection? Like, that's what I want people to be able to talk about.
I'll bear that in mind for future analysis. And I think that's definitely something that getting that across to that sort of information across to the average player and the those that follow Pro League but don't necessarily play sort of at that plat level and things, and the sort of the fans of the teams but not trying to be sort of not competing in any way, not playing go forwards, they're playing casuals, and for some people casuals are enough. But understanding why you make those plays is definitely something that would be really interesting. One feature that I've really wanted to sort of, which would definitely aid this, is the ability for the in-game client to save match replays. so that you can also watch them from the spectator's position as well, which would give you that top-down thing where you can see, because it's sort of, it would be an analysis sort of heaven, because you can see the line of sights that they've made and things like that. And it's something that you can see that some more developed esports games have managed to add in. From my personal experience, Dota, every single match has an ID, and you can search up specific matches. Do you think that would be something that we could see in the future for Siege?
I mean, I really think that that's something that could be put into the game that would help grow the scene. I can tell you, and I mean, the faces I was making initially was because as a coach, that's terrible. I really don't want someone to be able to jump into my match, see where every single player is sitting, seeing where every single vault cam was thrown, seeing where every single ADS was placed. Like, that crushes you. Like, I mean, that when we're talking about something increasing the workload, that increases the workload, because now every single time you play a map, you have to throw everything out, because someone knows everything that you're doing in an instant. So as long as they're doing the work, which you have to make the assumption that they are.
Of course.
But I mean, as long as that is around, that also is something that increases the skill cap, because now you can't just place everything where where you want them to be placed. Everything has a meaning. So if you know a team is attacking office, it's going to be different than if a team is attacking armory. So those do change where your ADSs and Valcams and all that stuff go. So you just have to know, as a Valkyrie, if they're going to take box side, I have to have like 20 different Valcams that I can throw. So that does increase the skill cap. You have to understand all of the angles in the game. So I do think that it's something that would be great for the community. It would be something that's great for the pro scene, because people would have to really step up their game to play competitively. And it would make for a lot better viewing experience. You could go back and watch your favorite player and say, I really like Redeemer. He's a solid anchor. I really want to learn how to play Echo and Maestro like he does. And then you could actually go sit and watch what Redeemer does all around.
But of course, it's got a negative side. What would be the balance then, do you think?
As far as if the video was put into play?
Yeah. Well, so that you weren't obviously sort of thrown wide open in terms of your strats and things, but also so that you had a tool at least similar in theory to it.
I don't know if there necessarily would be an opening. I mean, you could say that you could make all the gadgets invisible, but that wouldn't matter, because once they throw a flashbang and the flashbang disappears, there's an ADS right there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a balance. It would really be the decision between protecting the team's strats and making the game better. And every single time, most people will choose to make the game better. Yeah. So I just initially said, as a coach, that would hurt me, because it's if you come up with something that's really good, it's really, really, really good, and then, you only can use it once, or, there's no reason why you couldn't come back to it, but you would have to have, say 4 or 5 different defaults. You couldn't just memorize one default. You would have to have, A, B, C, however you wanted to call them, hey, let's run C. So the team would have to understand where each of your walls were, what that meant for your strat, and then they could kind of then say, okay, we know how they're set up, which if a team is that prepared, they deserve to win. If that team understands 4 different defaults you have, that's a team that's very prepared for your match.
Yeah. That's what I thought might have been a good idea. Maybe needs some fine tuning. In terms, so as we're on the subject of features that could be added into the game, not necessarily to change operators or meta, but the sort of the menus and things like that. Is there anything that you'd like to have built-in extra to the game?
Built-in extra to the game, a way to warm up. actually warm up, not terrorists that throw flashbangs at you randomly, no matter if you're crouching or walking or anything, they still know you're there. Or bombers who show up like on the other side of a wall when you open a door and blow you up. Then you have to wait for the game to reload all back out and back in so you can keep warming up. Or rooms filled with C4. I just like it was nice when the zombie thing was out because you could actually go into one of those by yourself and kill like a ton of zombies, and that was way better than Terrorist Hunt. But yeah, some way to be able to just warm up on your own, because warming up is not only important for competitive players, it's important for all players. Maybe not like someone who just likes playing the game casually, which 100% is like, I just like everybody to play this game. So I don't care. Like if you only like playing casual, just play casual. Like as long as, you know, it's like something that you enjoy. But like, I mean, you have to warm up your aim or you're just like going to go into it unprepared, right? So, I mean, anyone should jump into a T-Hunt 3 or 4 times and then play. And really, I wish they could just jump in and like do like some sort of aim practice and then play. But yeah, that's one thing. And then inside the game, there needs to be some sort of pause feature, like some sort of way to like fix how long it takes to rehost games, because all the rehosts that always it kills viewership. People don't want to stick around and wait for you to rehost 4 times.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it's frustrating for players. If you got a player who's really hot and doing really well, and he's got to sit through 4 rehosts, and now he's like ice cold like everybody else, it throws away all your momentum. And it like breaks your like focus mentally when you're like sitting there having to wait over and over again through 5-minute timers. It's a joke, really.
I hadn't thought of that as a rehost feature. One thing I keep sort of picking up on things that you've said, and the viewership. What would you think of a built-in sort of live stream feed of pro matches? If they're going on, people are in the game client, sort of queuing for ranked matches just on the main menu. Instead of looking at the newest operators, you've got the pro scene being played from whatever region. Probably you tier it but you can watch live matches going on. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. I think that's a great idea. I would really like that. I mean, kind of like I know Counter-Strike does it. And I think League does it too with like their major tournaments. It's like it's actually on their like launcher screen. Yeah. And I don't think there's any reason why it shouldn't be done. So I'm not sure. However, they need to set it up between ESL and Ubisoft to make it work. But because I'm sure there's some sort of rights there, because it's not the same company that owns the game and is in running the tournaments. So I'm sure there's something that's like behind that. But I know that they do try to like promote it as much as they can with like the little things in the lower left-hand corner, like the little ad block. Yeah. So it'll say like match tonight, blah versus blah. I really like. I do like that addition, because back when I played, it wasn't there so much. So at least it's something. But I agree, like it would be really nice, because I mean, sometimes players don't understand that there is even really a competitive scene, or sometimes they don't know that it could be like interesting for them to watch. And then if they're just sitting there and like, say a 5-minute, 10-minute queue for whatever reason, they could be like, wow, this is actually something that's interesting to me. Like I actually do want to watch this. And then, you just got another viewer for free. It's free marketing.
And I imagine there are casual players out there that are really effective casual players who have no idea that there's a pro scene, and that casual player could be the next, Pengu, but we might never realize that there's a pro scene until it's too late to get interested and get involved. I'm sure there are some sort of diamonds in the rough out there, waiting to be discovered. There's obviously been a bit of a rise with sort of things like academy teams. There was definitely a young lad whilst I was in Paris. Someone pointed, I think it was a Lems. He pointed out to me and said, "Oh, I've been sort of mentoring this lad," and this lad was 15, and he was in the Market Academy team at the time, or sort of being sort of prepped to be in like Mocket because he'd been trained for however long, sort of something like 12 months. Eleventh had sort of mentored this kid, and there's definitely sort of a rise on that, but it's quite a long time from 15 to Pro League at 18. I suppose actually that could almost be an interesting thing to have your opinion on. The age of like players, it's obviously requires 18-year-old to play Go 4s and play Pro League Challenger, any sort of significant tournament. You have to be 18 with ESL. Do you think that's potentially stunting talent that might develop?
I hope it's not stunting talent that's developed. I know obviously there's people that are under the 18 like age limit that probably could actually play on certain teams that are pro right now. I've never been affected by the age limit because I was 26 when the game came out, so it didn't affect me at all. So I've never really cared either way for it or not because I wasn't stopped from playing. I understand why. It's not a rule; it's a law. They're affected by a law, so they're not choosing to do it. They're just they're just following a law. So to me, I see it differently, and I totally do understand that if I was 16, I would be upset by it because also too, when you're 16, you don't understand really as much like how the world works. So it's kind of like it's against me kind of thing. So I do understand kind of like their mindset and probably where they come from. I do hope that they stick around to play the game. What else are they going to do if they're good at this? Like, you might as well stick around and get that much better. So when you are 18, that you can jump onto a team. Because I can tell you now, when I was playing, it was a lot easier to get to Pro League than it is now. It's very difficult. You have to go through Challenger League if you want to make it on your own. And then you have to beat a pro team on one day. Like anything can happen on one day. So if your 6 months of work turns into we lost this one match. Now you got to do it all over again. So it's difficult to get into Pro League. So if they want to make it, they just got to get better. And I know there's people that are out there that can do it already. They just have to wait their time. That's just pretty much what it comes down to.
What advice would you give to up-and-coming talent then?
The same thing that I think a lot of people would say right away, like most underage players are too aggressive. I wouldn't agree with that. I do think that they use a lot of their like natural skill to create plays more than they should. For instance, I can tell you from my own experience, Yaga, who's a player in North America who's very skilled, who's underage, in ranked, he'll just open the big window in Oregon for like a dorms hold. He'll just open the big window and fight anybody with an ACOG from the dorm window to the junkyard spawn because he can. But when you're talking about competitive, you can't just sit there and do that because if you don't win, you're instantly in a 4v5. So, and I'm not saying that he necessarily does that in competitive, but that's like kind of like understanding what your life means to every single round and understanding like what you're giving to the team while you're alive and while you're dead. And like, that's a big thing that people don't get right away, no matter what your age is. So, just use that time from when you're, 16 to 18, you got 2 years to perfect your craft. And as long as you take it seriously, I don't see why you can't, make it to Pro League.
Yeah. So there was something else I wanted to bring up. I think there was one moment earlier where we heard them in the background. You obviously have a full family. You said earlier.
Did you hear them?
I heard them at one point. But you said 3 boys, and
3 boys.
Which I imagine is quite the handful at times. But with Siege, how do you manage that work-life balance?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but I'm actually I'm taking 18 credits this semester, so I'm over full time. And then I'm actually working on side projects, and then I'm a coach. So, and I'm married and have 3 kids. So I tell people that it's not even that hard for me, mostly because of my military experience. When I was on the submarine, there was weeks I was working over 100 hours in a week. And that was because, like, you know, something was broken on the boat and we had a mission and we had to get out on a certain time. So you got to stay at work and fix it until it's fixed. Yeah. And you don't get to go home till it's fixed. So, I mean, that kind of long hours, I mean, quote unquote, shitty week kind of thing. I'm used to it. I dealt with it when I was in the Navy. So now out of the Navy, I'm doing everything that I want to do. I like doing it. So now I still have really, really long weeks, but it doesn't affect me because I'm enjoying every single part of it. So I think the big thing I would always usher on to people is find what you enjoy in what you're doing and focus on that. Because, I mean, everyone has shitty stuff they have to deal with. That's just part of life, you know. No one wants to get up at 7 o'clock, but sometimes that's when you have to get up to like get stuff done. So the family life is awesome. I love it. I didn't get to experience a lot of it in the beginning because I was in the Navy and I was gone. So now that I'm home and I get to see my boys all the time, I definitely cherish it, I think, more than some, because I didn't get to experience it that much in the beginning.
Well, I'm glad you've got that as an opportunity now. And so, what was other things that I'm sure... I wanted to ask what you made of the new version of Hereford and whether you think it is viable as a map. That face is tells 1,000 words. Yeah,
so I think the new Hereford is actually a really, really cool map. I think it has some of the early on problems that Villa has, and like some of the sound doesn't make any sense. And what I mean by the sound doesn't make sense is that, you know, we kind of touched on sound a little bit earlier, in the fact that that some games you can hear sound straight through walls. In this game, you're not supposed to, but for some reason on Villa and Hereford, they like adapted a new idea of sound, and like you're like walking and you can literally hear the person right below you, like they're walking on top of you. So like some of the sound in certain areas is broken. The top floor is crazy. The top floor is literally a gun free for all. It's just like this complete open site. And I mean, the defense just brings like 4 ACOGs and tries to fight you as you like walk into like the top floor. It's actually insane. So if they did bring it into Pro League, it would be something to watch. Yeah. And it would be crazy teams that would take you to that map, because it's as far as strats go, it's really hard to break down strats, because unless you're running smoke strats, the top floor is insane. Like the top floor is literally a long angle everywhere. So and I think that the middle 2 floors, now I haven't like gone into it like I would for any other map. The middle 2 floors are really weird. There's a lot of small cornered rooms that I'm sure if you hard breached straight into, like it would completely break down setups. But I'm not 100% on that. So the middle 2 floors are weird, and then the basement's chaotic because it has 2 really hard pinch points, and then it's got like one really long quad wall on the side. So if they did bring it in, I think it would be interesting. I think that a lot of teams would be scared to play it, though.
Yeah. So do you think they will? I mean, you might be privy to conversations that sort of answer that question, but
I don't think they will.
Yeah.
I think that if anything, they're going to remake other maps as well and probably bring those back in. I'd really like to see them remake Chala with some adaptation to take out K9, because Chala could be okay in some parts, but like K9 breaks the whole map. Like that perch and being able to see every rotate like completely hurts you. And I'd really like Cafe used to be my favorite map, but it's so hard to attack that site because most of your choices for the top floor is to drop the skylight or drop red hatch. And as long as you're playing against other good teams, they can prepare for that. And like, it really makes attacking that hard. So, I mean, the whole adaptation was, oh, well, now you can vault instead of rappelling in or doing that crazy drop from the skylight. And then that's when Ying Glass combos were really strong. And so then it was like the real kind of like, AIDS combo was like you smoked everything, threw Yings in, dropped and planted, and then won the round. So if they could find some way to make Cafe better too, I'd really like to see Cafe come back.
Yeah, Cafe, I have a bit of a sort of love-hate relationship personally. I don't know. Maybe it's just the fact that I always seem to play it at night on ranked.
Well, ranked Cafe is completely different than competitive Cafe because, and for mostly because of the reason I just kind of explained is when you're playing competitive, your whole team is working together. So when your first person is dropping down red hatch, it's for a very particular reason, and everyone's working together to make sure that guy doesn't die when he enters into Cigar. But when you're playing ranked, even if you're playing with your friends, you're kind of like playing on your own. Yeah. And that site is so hard specifically to like get into and like take any map control when you're doing it all on your own drones. Because at any time someone can slip into Cigar or they can wide peek from white spot, and it's Cafe is way too hard to play in ranked. I don't even want Cafe in the ranked pool, but it might be something that it'd be worth coming back to competitive. So that's kind of.
And obviously, with the way that the site rotation works at the moment, Cafe isn't viable because it's only got 3 sites. How? So.
I forgot about that too. Yeah.
So the question is, I don't know whether you could, but if you could fit another site in, what do you think would be? Where would you put those bombs? I suppose. It's very much like, I suppose, a less serious question unless you have a very serious sort of solution. Because I'm struggling to think of something that would be balanced.
Well, I've always said that the downstairs bomb site would be better if it was just kitchen prep, kitchen grill. Yeah. Like, just take it out of bakery or change bakery to not have 4 windows. The fact that there's 4 windows into the bakery or 3 windows in the big door is brutal. Like, you can't sit anywhere in bakery. Yeah. So just move it back or even make one of them in freezer. But then you have to take out the hatch, I think. So if you just moved that away from the door so much, then like it makes the connector between bakery and kitchen prep, that little connector room, it makes that room really strong kind of pivot point. So that might be interesting. I always kind of liked an idea of trying to like put reading or library as like one of like the sites, but then I don't know where you put the other one because it's kind of on its lonesome, maybe into like the laundry room, but that's a really tiny bomb site, so that would be hard to decide.
Would you see perhaps in the same way that they put construction into Clubhouse, would you see perhaps, I don't know, maybe an expansion out onto the terrace, that flat roof, so that there was an additional site added in? You just raise the flat roof up, or
that actually is I mean, that's a cool idea, because then now you're talking about having a platform on piano, which then makes it a viable ranked map, because now you have a platform that you can sit a player on instead of him being on repels, because repels are a lot harder to attack from than if you're just able to, walk angles around a window. So if you added another bomb site, maybe added another room instead of the perch being right outside mining, maybe have another room that has windows on it. I mean, that's a pretty interesting idea too.
Because then I suppose you could almost put a second site, piano, and then that additional room, which would, that would be vertical. It's all hypothetical, so I suppose.
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of things they could do with that map. I think they have to do something to be able to make it a worthwhile map. That map used to be decent when there wasn't as many operators, but now that there's so many different operators that can do so many different things. Those operators are starting to actually ruin maps.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this was a good map at one point, but now you can't play it because of Ying or because of, whatever the case may be.
And is that okay? So is that what determines your like the most played maps in sort of Pro League? The certain maps are just ruined by those operators, so you tend to pick the maps that are not ruined as much by those operators.
Kind of. Most of your map picks come from playstyle.
Mm-hmm.
Teams that are more aggressive and aren't afraid to push are more likely to play maps like Consulate, because you can make more things happen and get away with a lot more on those kind of maps. Mm-hmm. So like that's why you see a certain team that likes to turtle. That's why they'll go to bank, because they can sit down and bank and turtle on that bomb site and really like come out with 2 or 3 wins just because they go there or whatever. So your play style is mostly based on how you like to play the game, and then you bring the right operators based on the map that you're actually playing. So that's kind of like how that whole thing breaks down.
Right. Consulate, which suddenly there've obviously been so many changes. I've not had the opportunity to sort of really pick anyone's brains about all of them. Obviously, we saw the addition of a new site in Consulate. Do you have opinions on that? We've seen some interesting plays. I think the most memorable is that G2 Rush, straight down the hatch. So, what do you make of the site, and how viable do you value it?
I think that the site's actually pretty interesting. I know it's really funny because when I started playing this game, like I said, I came from League of Legends, so I wasn't like a hardcore FPS player. So I didn't turn off everything but bomb right away. Yeah. So I did play some secure area and I did play some hostage when the first game came out. Like really, like all of the December when the game came out, and then some of January. And I like really started becoming like one of the better players in the Central. I played Central first before moving to East, and the other really good players from Central were like, "Why are you playing all of like turn those off? Only play bomb." And I was like, "Oh, okay," because I didn't know. But before that, so I attacked the archives on Consulate quite often when you're playing the other 2 objectives or the other 2 game modes. So I was used to patching in Visa and blowing up the floor and like playing that vertical game through Visa. So I'm very familiar with those. I'm not going to go into too much into what I would do personally to attack that site, because I'm going to keep that for myself.
Yeah,
I'm sure. But no, when I saw G2 rushing, I knew it was coming, and I knew that they would do it. There's a drone hole that you can get for the basement that gives you a lot of vision, that like you can save your drone easily and get it down there. And they got a lot of vision early, and I saw it and I was like, they're rushing this. And they did a great job. Like G2, like we already kind of like talked about, is very good at making those quick adaptations. So
yeah. I'm sure there's sort of just quickly going through see whether I missed anything that I quickly wrote down. But so I suppose I'm now just sort of asking things that come to my head. This has very much been sort of me picking your brains, of course. What going forward, I suppose, like the future of Rainbow Six, where do you see it sort of going? What are the things that you really want to see from the game? Which is quite a broad thing, so I do, as a question, do with it as you will. I'm sure you'll have something.
Yeah, I think a big thing, as far as like this game is concerned, is understanding at some point what we want this game to look like to other people. Mm-hmm. And I do like the fact that they're ambitious with some of the operators well, not some of the operators that come up with. I do respect and appreciate their ambition and wanting to constantly come up with new people, because like I said, coming from League of Legends, there's new champions that were put out all the time since its release. Like it was like bi-monthly new champions were coming out. And so I'm not new to the fact that, you know, you constantly are coming up with like these new operators and putting them into the game. But, you know, at some point you got to realize sometimes you're doing more harm than good with some of the people that are coming out with. Like a wall hack operator is really, really hard to deal with when you're talking about playing a game competitively. So I think that there needs to be, to really make this game something special, I think it'll take like an ex-pro player or an ex-coach or something being hired by Ubisoft, and like someone that they can trust and listen to tell them like, we can't do this. Like if you do this, it's going to be way too hard to deal with, and it's not going to be fun to watch. Because I don't know, like when Lion came out, the chat was wild. I mean, everyone was like, "Oh, another lion kill! Like, wow, such skill! Like, great gameplay!" Yeah. Because really, it was too easy, and the fact that you couldn't ban and get him off the board, like, it wasn't fun to watch. So, the game has to find like some sort of ground where they can actually talk to pro players. And the problem right now is that a lot of pro players take advantage of their voice, and it really kind of gets on my nerves. Is there's players that are really good in this game that are very vocal about what they think the game should be like, but a lot of times their opinions are based solely on what would make them better. So they'll say, well, let's get rid of shields because they don't play shields, or like, let's get rid of ACOGs because they only play reflex and hollow, and stuff like that. Those kind of things hurt like the improvement of the game, because now, why would Ubisoft listen to us? Why are they going to listen to us when they think, well, you're only saying that because you just want them off the board to make yourself look better? So that's why I say like they have to hire like an ex-player or an ex-coach so that like really progress can start being made.
And obviously there's a very vocal chunk of Reddit, right? Commonly referred to as the Silvers, which, you know, they in one breath, they are the group that says give Jaeger back his ACOG. Definitely wouldn't be a good move in terms of balancing. But how would you approach balancing the esport pro, like professional player voice, to that sort of silver attitude, which is obviously sort of an attitude that is born much more from players with lower skills, or perhaps they're just higher skills that would really like to have ACOG back on Jaeger so they can, you know, frag out.
It's a kind of like it's an interesting dynamic what we've kind of turned this community into. Like when this game first came out, I got on Reddit all the time, but it got to a point where something happened at some point where the people who frequent Reddit and the like competitive players or like high ranked serious players, and I hate to even make that divide really, but somewhere in that they started hating each other. And like now I don't go on Reddit ever, because like it's just one of those things where a lot of times people that go on Reddit they'll just talk poorly about the players who are in the competitive scene, and then the people who are in the competitive scene talk frequently poorly about the Reddit people on their Twitter pages and on social media. So like it's created this giant divide between the people who play and watch Pro League and then the people who play in it. So it doesn't do anything good for the game. All it does is hurt viewership, because now the people like, what's to make that person want to watch it if all you're going to do is talk bad about them on social media? It makes no sense. So it's really unfortunate what it's kind of turned into. I would really like to see some sort of like divide be met, and it's got to be done by Ubisoft's like community managers. Justin and Epi really have to find a way to like connect the two pairs back together, and I don't know how you go about doing it honestly, but that's not my job, so I don't have to worry about it. But no, it would be really nice, because I mean, sure, I blame the blitz buffs on Reddit. I do, and I mean I'm part of the problem there, right? Because I'm saying that, but I don't think that blitz should have ever been put into the position he is now. But the game wanted to be able to connect and reach out to that group, and so to connect and reach out to that group, they made these buff changes. Yeah. And the same with like the SMG11's ACOG. It was really kind of driven by Reddit, was to take away the pocket sniper's ACOG. And so they did that. And, you know, it'd be nice if the two sides can find some common ground. So it's not like we have to either appease them or we have to appease them. Somehow we have to make it so everyone is happy with the change.
So bringing up the pocket sniper and just immediately had me thinking, with the recoil it's obviously got now, would it be balanced again? On a
if you brought an ACOG on it now, you would have a lot of issues.
Maybe that's an argument there. It's definitely, I suppose, actually, that's sort of Reddit's role. That sort of highlights Reddit's role in changing the metas as well, because there are such significant game changes made so for their benefit, because they reached out and, you know, pushed for something, and now like you then see the effects of that with this overpowered blitz, or like this blitz being in a position, which is obviously a good thing in some ways, because it's developing the meta, it's changing things, so it's not too things don't stagnate as much. It definitely, I imagine, keeps you on your toes, but then again, it's not necessarily for the benefit of everyone, and like finding that common ground is probably incredibly challenging.
Yeah, one of my biggest problem with blitz is that the way that you counter a shield, right? You have two options. Three. He stands up, you shoot his legs. He sits down, you shoot his hand. The only other way that you deal with a shield is you melee, and you like shoot him in the stomach or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that against blitz. His whole ability is to counter the way you deal with a shield. So like in that aspect, I believe he's slightly broken, because one way that you have to deal with a shield is to get close and punch him, but you can't get close and punch a blitz. Your only option is to run away. Well, you can't run away from blitz. He's too fast. So it's, yeah, I have a problem with him in particular, because of the way he's made. But obviously you can't still deal with him. Like teams that play blitz don't just like smash other teams, you know, like you can create like cross angles, and if he like, you know, gets too close, you can easily punish him. But I mean, another one too that you can talk about is Tachanka. Like granted, like he's really like nothing into the meta, but he was, you know, changed for Reddit as well. So there are things that have been done to kind of like benefit Reddit. There's probably a ton of things, like the Lion nerf finally happened because of the Pro League players. So they do have to like fight this battle where they're constantly trying to like make the Pro League players happy, but at the same time they're trying to make the Reddit players happy.
Tachanka is an interesting one. Obviously, I imagine the aim is to have every operator Pro League viable as well as Reddit viable.
I hate that. And I'll say the reason why I don't like that in particular, like I said, from League, there's a champion called Riven, and Riven, if you've played the game, is really, really good in solo queue. You can go top lane, you can get like really like a couple early kills, and then smash a ranked game. But it doesn't matter in a competitive scene. You don't ever see a competitive player playing Riven because she's not good in the competitive scene. So I do think that there should be operators that are only really good in rank, that never make it to the pro scene. If you're going to be creating all of these operators, there's going to be at some point, you know, 60, 70 operators, every single one of them
think I'm losing connection. Chat, if you're still there, hit me up in chat. Might have lost Lycan. What's happening? Oh. Lycan, if you're still there, we're having a bit of a robot situation. Like connections just seem to have died on us. Give it. Chat's just going F. Give me a second. Just getting. And 1 second, and we're back.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly now.
Yeah, I went to like one bar. That was weird.
So Donut said every single operator, and then it cut. So.
Oh, so yeah, that's pretty much where I ended. I was just saying that like if you're trying to make like 60 to 70 operators all viable at one time, it would make for a very wonky gameplay, because it's too hard to try to say, okay, well, smoke has to be just as good as frost.
Okay.
Like it's too hard to make two operators who do two completely different things equal. You just have to make sure that each operator does their job balanced compared to everyone else. And like sometimes that means that there's operators that won't ever be played. You don't need a sitting turret in a game. Like you just don't. But like, you might want to play the sitting turret in casual, or in ranked, you might want to meme on somebody, set it up on a window and get a spawn kill. Like those things, can happen. And that they're part of the game, because the game's also meant to be fun.
Yeah.
But like competitive is serious. It's for money. It's for a lot more than that to a lot of people. It doesn't need to have every operator involved.
I think it's a very interesting attitude that you have there, and I'm really impressed with sort of how well thought out that is, because you've instantly sort of converted me to that way of thinking, where previously I was sort of the other thing of it would be like better to have everything viable. I think except for Tachanka, who I just think has become a meme and will stay a meme. As an operator.
I mean, the only way to really make Tachanka different than what he is to change who he is. And I think that certain people would be upset if you changed who he was, because people like him because he is who he is.
Yeah. And
now once you change that, they lose that kind of like the Lord meme. And he has a place in the game, right? Everyone calls him the Lord. Like he has his place. So just leave him there.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, I think we've been live for like an hour and 50. I never asked whether there was a cutoff point. We obviously got quite distracted. If there's anything you wanted to bring up in discussion, I'd be, which I suppose is even more open-ended than any of my previous questions up until this point.
I mean, I didn't really know what to expect. I just I took this mostly because of and I actually don't even really know his name. I just call him Chanka. The first interview I ever did was actually with him when I was a pro player on Onslaught. So I only really kind of took it mostly out of respect for him. I'm willing to talk about anything, but I don't really have anything in particular I came on to talk about. So I'm just excited to talk about Rainbow in general.
Yeah. How long have you known Chuck?
The reason why I met him is probably because of my most hated part of my Pro League experience. And that was, like I said, I was in Pro League, and then I met this giant wall of ESL who pretty much toppled my career and sent me into Challenger League. And those familiar with esports more outside Rainbow Six are really familiar with the best, or having the 3 of 5 rule for your teams. And so what happened is kind of like this, the system is different now, but you would go from your season 3 ending in November, and then your season 1 was starting in March. So there's a giant time space between the 2 seasons. And I was on Ferocity back then, and Ferocity, we did the invitationals, and we almost were able to beat Era to make it to invitationals, which they ended up in second place to CTM back then. And we moved into that next season with the same roster we took to invitationals, and they didn't tell us until like the very last minute that we couldn't keep that roster because it didn't meet the 3 of 5 rule from our team back in November. So then we had to play with like a player that quit the game, and he was a player that we replaced on our team for a reason. And so we had to play with him. The games just did not work out. We did not perform very well. And it was the first season that had like the tournament style, and we lost 2 games and we were done.
Yeah.
So then I, on Onslaught, started playing Challenger League. We won the first Challenger League season, but lost our relegation game. And then we went through a whole nother season of Challenger League and won that relegation game. So, I mean, that was the Ronin team. I would have been a part of that team. But that's when I got dropped, and then I became a coach.
So I've had a DM from one of the owners who wanted to ask you about the Pro League format in regards to a tweet that you made, which was, if you win a best of 3, then you should have banned the map you lost in a best of 1. Therefore, you would have still won the best of 1. I'm not defending or supporting best of 1s. I just think some of the arguments don't make sense. So that sounds like it's in specific reference to specific people who have made comments. I'm not expecting you to out them, of course, but like, can you explain your sort of thought process and the things behind that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not actually afraid to out them because they've chose to do it on their own social media. I'm not doing it because they DM'd me complaining about best of 1s. But most specifically, Cloud9 and Obey have made a lot of statements about best of 1s. And so that's what really geared my tweet, was the fact that I was continuously seeing these, like, even if they won or if they lost, it was because of like, hey, look at this format. Like, this format's the problem, when really, if you actually sit down and think about it, that's what my tweet was all pointing out, is if you ban the right maps, because I don't remember what it was. Cloud9 was playing somebody and they lost the first game, and then they won the second 2. So their argument was, hey, we lost the first game, but we won the second 2. So if we played a best of 1, we would have lost. That was their argument. But I actually remember, because obviously it makes sense. So the first map was Consulate, and they were playing Obey. And then they ended up winning Oregon, and then I think Villa, but I don't remember. I'd have to go back. But the Consulate pick was Obey's pick, and Obey's good at Consulate specifically. That's why people ban Consulate against them. So yeah, when you play a best of 3, you're going to play a map that the other team's good at because they want to play it. They picked it. Like, they left it in there for a reason. But if you're playing a best of 1, you can take away more maps, and you should be able to take away that map that they're good at, and it leaves only your map and the decider map. Now that team has to pick between either, like, they have to decide which map would you consider your map and which map would be left for the decider map. Which one do they want to go with? So really, in a best of 1 to best of 3, there's no difference. Because if you were going to win a best of 3, you were going to win a best of 1. Because in a best of 3, there has to be 2 maps that you are going to win. So I just think a lot of people are complaining about the wrong things. Like, yeah, sometimes you start slow, sometimes you lose your map pick. But I mean, at any day, like I said, we should have beat that team when I was in Challenger League to go into to win that relegation game. That team I had for relegations had Bosco and Crazy on it. We were a very good team, and I had very good players on that team, and we lost. The team that we lost to had players from Accelerate on it, which are like performing poorly in Challenger League right now. Like we should, I believe 100% we should have won that game, but we lost. Like sometimes you just lose, and to like blame something other than what the actual reason is just not needed.
Yeah. So this has suddenly made me think of, we've seen this notably from Secret and from G2, where they are picking maps to play against an opponent to ban it a week in advance against the next opponent. What do you have opinions on this? Do you, because this is a sort of something that is starting to sort of, I've seen it a couple of other times. I'm wondering whether or not this is going to be a trend that starts to happen, where people are almost playing this much longer game, thinking several weeks in advance about an opponent.
So I didn't. Who made that comment?
So this was not so much a comment as something that I just sort of thought of, but this is like with Secret and G2 in the first half of the season, the maps that they played the week before they played each other were picked intentionally so that they didn't have the other one didn't have that as an open map. Whoops, I've gone out of focus.
Well, okay, so if no one said it, and it was just something you came up with, that's a very smart thought. So we were able to kind of pick this format a little bit. ESL came to us with a couple different options, and we had to pick from those options. Now I don't know what teams are doing your process and which teams are not, but we are.
Right.
I don't know. That's as much as I can go into it.
Of course, yeah. That sounds like I wouldn't want to put you in an awkward spot there. But yeah, it definitely seems to be something that is sort of, there's this longer game coming out with the thought process, the rise of, I feel like also over Season 8, especially, definitely been apparent with G2, increasingly apparent with some EU teams, and but I'm not so, I think some NA teams, but not as many, not as high a proportion. The concept of strat hiding as well. G2 are obviously in a very comfortable position where they can afford to do that because they can take more risk in their matches now because they're so far ahead. But sort of again, like in that first half of the season for that matchup, G2 Secret, they both had I think one of them had a matchup against Millennium, so they weren't as in such a luxurious position, but the sort of concept of hiding strats in advance and playing sort of more simplistically, this is something that seems to be on a rise. Is that the case? Do you have opinions on that? Do you think, like, pros and cons?
You will. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. It used to be a lot more cut and dry on that answer than it is now. You used to be able to hide things against certain teams because you knew that you were going to win no matter what the case is. Now it kind of feels like EU, and I hate to say it because it's really, to be honest, rude, but I hate, like, I mean, teams are getting free wins in EU.
Yeah, no, that's...
I mean, that's just honestly what it is.
There are a couple of teams that are pretty much a free ticket.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is what it is. In NA, it's a lot closer. Now, whether... I'm not going to go into the, one region's better than the other. Like, that's what invitationals and finals are for. But in North America, I don't think there's a single team that is willing to risk not running their best stuff on every day. Because, I mean, you can see how close our games are.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it might be one of those things where you could maybe, like, say you're winning enough that you want to hide one of your bomb sites. Hey, we're up like 4-1, like we're finally on defense. Let's just not go to this one bomb site. Let's just go to another one. Like take the loss on one defense site, and then we can finish up on our two like good sites. If you were to gamble that, sure, good on you. That's very confident of yourself. But I think in North America you can't get away with it. I would say the only time that you're ever hiding strats is maybe U.S. Nationals. If you're playing a team that is not even Challenger League, why run real strats? Just run defaults, run cookie cutter strats that have worked since the beginning of time. And like you should be able to beat them. Like in Pro League, you have to come up with more than that. In US Nationals, you probably don't.
Interesting. We've actually, so US Nationals are a really good subject as well. And the other sort of tournaments. So there's been OGA. There were all of the matches to qualify for Paris. There's obviously been a massive rise in the number of matches that are sort of available. Like the videos are available to re-watch of your opponents. How has that changed things in terms of, in theory, you can obviously prep a whole lot more. There's so much more material to work with. Is that increasing workloads? I mean, 100%. I'm asking this of someone who said earlier, like adaptability, no sort of dry runs. So has that changed things though, having that extra?
Yeah, because I mean, even if someone doesn't do, this is one thing I preach to, even if someone is running a completely different strat than what you can get what their mentality is. You can say, this guy really is comfortable if he can rotate blue. Like this guy really likes, to make a play here. He constantly starts his drones from here. You can get that kind of like mentality because players are comfortable doing certain things more than others. And that's the kind of stuff that you look for. You can get like all their setups and like, if they don't actually change their setups, then you can punish them for it. Because some teams are really think that what they have is good, and no matter what you bring, they can do a mid-round adaptation to beat what you're bringing. So there are teams that will keep their strats, which I mean, it's all like kind of like what your playstyle is. Not one way is better than the other. But yeah, I agree. Like when I played, really all you did was you brought your best stuff, and then you just saw if it was better than the other team's best stuff. But now you can be a lot more prepared with all the different VODs that are out there.
So I'm now sort of jumping mentally because
that's
I keep
fine.
thinking of different things. We've seen a number of teams pick up team houses. What do you think of team houses?
I think team houses can be really good if used right. I think team houses can be really bad if not controlled properly. I mean, there's nothing to get. I mean, no matter what you say, some of the guys, I always say kids, but really I try to say guys. Some of the guys are only 18, 19, 20. Like they want to have fun and live life just as much as they want to play this game and win. So you have to make sure that if you're going to be all living in a house together, that you're taking the time to use it properly. Nothing is better than when you can boot camp and like all sit down together and like go over a strat in person, because that really cements it when everyone's ideas are being heard. And it's not like, you don't know that one guy is just sitting there like scarfing his face and eating dinner while you're trying to go over a strat. And then you say, hey, did you get all that? And they're like, yeah. And he actually didn't listen to a single word you said. So when you're all in person, you have everyone's direct attention. So as long as you use it properly, it can be really good, but it can be just as distracting, because if your team's having a problem, you don't get away from the problem. You live with the problem. So say Rampy and Redeemer get in a fight during practice. When they get off the computer, they see each other in the kitchen. Like that would be a problem. Like,
Yeah.
but when you're not in a team house, when you get off the game, you're away from your whole team. So you kind of have that like reset, and you can kind of forget about it and like get over it over the day until you see them the next day. So, there's pluses and minuses to it all. I think in the end, if you are a responsible, strong team, it's more advantageous than disadvantage.
I think that's pretty much everything that I'd sort of thought of in advance to sort of compare. Spec says a team office with individual apartments is the best solution.
Yeah, it would still give you a way to be able to like escape from it all, and then you would just have a place where you guys come together and still work and focus and put the time in. I would agree with that statement.
I thought of something. So APAC as a region, obviously developing, obviously it has challenging things to deal with, such as the ping, to scrim outside the region, or just to scrim inside the region, because being split into sub-regions, the sub-regions can only really scrim against themselves within their sub-region. So getting the opportunity to scrim against the sort of, for the best teams to scrim against the best teams in their own sub-regions, let alone sort of outside the region, is quite a challenge on focus. I'm just going to be blowy. What are your thoughts on APAC and the problems that they face?
I do sympathize with the excuse, because honestly, I'm gonna be frank, that whole reasoning is an excuse. We can't get better because we don't have better players around us. That's an excuse, and I understand it, because it is easier to get better if you're playing better teams, but it is not impossible to get better if you spend the time and make sure you do what's right. There's nothing saying that they can't go watch the best teams and look at their strats and say, will this strat actually work against that team? Like, look at what like the team did and whether that defense won or lost based on how that good team was attacking. Like, could they do that to our own setup and like actually spend the time to like break it down? You could on your own get better. It's a lot harder, but I mean, if you want to win, you got to put in the work. And so, yeah, sure, other teams do have it easier. Like European teams, I think, have it a lot easier because, G2 is technically the best team in the world right now. And those guys easily get to scrim G2 more than anyone else because they have the same time frame. So, yeah, sure, they can get better quicker because they're playing against G2. Does that mean that any team doesn't have a chance at winning? No, because Liquid turned around and won it in the first season of this year. So There's no reason why other teams can't win. It's just a lot easier when you do play good teams. So I see both sides, but I disagree with the statement.
So I think I've finally run out of things. Sort of run out of things, thought of something else, run out of things again. So I think at just over 2 hours and 10 minutes, probably a good place to round up. I wasn't given a length of time that I was supposed to fill, so I hope I'm sure we've covered enough. I think that we've gone over all sorts of things.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you guys ever want me back, I'm always happy to do it. Like I said, I do kind of have like a little bit of a connection through Chanko with you guys, so I would appreciate to like come back at some point later on. And also too, I'm not shy on social media, so if anyone like ever wants to reach out to me and stuff, I'm not afraid to give my opinion on topics.
That's fantastic. I would definitely bear that in mind. We might and I'm sure we'll have you back because it has been fantastic having you on here. I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode of the Debrief, and hopefully we'll be back again next weekend with another one. This has been the Debrief, hosted by myself, Shevla, And we have had the wonderful Lycan sharing his thoughts and opinions and a lot of insight. I've definitely been a learning experience for me. So thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.
See ya.